welcome to another check-in video for my ongoing reading of A Year with Swollen Appendices, which was Brian Eno's diary from 1995, and in this video I'm just going to be talking about the period for April 1995. I've gone over to putting these out at the start of the month for the month previous. So, what was going on mainly? Lots of different things in the diary. Obviously, as I've said before, I'm not going to go into everything, but there's four main things I think that came up. One thing that's featured heavily at the start of April is this self-storage installation at the Acorn Storage Centre. I know I mentioned it this month. I mentioned it the previous month in March for my video from March. But yeah, it's open now and it's running through in April. As you can see now, here's the date. So it ran for a month. And so that gets mentioned quite a bit at the start of the April entries for 1995. There's also mentioned a trip to Sicily. And you can see here, I'll include the link to this. Largest and most populous island in the Mediterranean Sea and one of 20 regions of Italy. So Sicily is that bit that's being kicked by the main part of Italy there. So yeah, he mentions a family holiday to there. Also, several times he mentions articles in Wired magazine. I think he's just been interviewed in the previous month actually, but he's talking to other people about being interviewed for Wired, and also along the lines of, getting paid for interviews and things like that. So I had to look it up because I couldn't remember when Wired first hit the shelves, and it was actually 1993 when Wired first appeared, and it's still going strong. And I think if I'm right, I can actually, I'm pretty sure I can read Wired magazine through the Libby app. So if you don't know about this, if you have an account with your local library, I think it's the case that you can access a lot of magazines online through the Libby service in combination with your library card. And this is a particular thing where I live in Nova Scotia, but I think it's pretty widespread both across Canada and different countries as well. But yeah, really useful feature. It's not got all magazines in there, but it's got some. It's got Wired, Metal Hammers in there, a number of I think it's the Enemy special editions, and a whole slew of other magazines as well. There's quite a lot of a fair smattering of technology magazines as well, and certainly I think all the guitar magazines are in there as well, so or most of them. So yeah, I was curious as to when this actually started. So yeah, and there was an interview recently on some podcast actually with the creator, I think, of Wired magazine, if my memory serves me correctly. I may have got that wrong, but that's another thing that made me think about it. But yeah, certainly was a podcast I listened to where they were talking to someone that's heavily involved with Wired magazine. This was also mentioned, which I'd not heard about this in years. So this was a piece of software that he was using with his kids called KidPix. I'm not sure what version it was because the Studio Deluxe version had just come out, I think, in 95. I think that's right. Yeah, KidPix Studio. So it could be this one, possibly. But yeah, I can remember there was quite a few of these very simple drawing programs that were aimed at children. I mean, you could do, obviously drawing in Windows there using Windows Paint, which was a sort of go-to thing. But then there was this release for the Macintosh. Now, I'm not sure when the actual Windows version came out. Oh, they've been developing a version for MS-DOS. Oh, look. 2018. Wow. Still going. It's iPad support. Anyway, I thought I'd mention that because it's always fun when certain pieces of software get mentioned in the diary, because he is quite an avid computer user, for various reasons. And I think this was the month where he was setting up his a computer that he bought for his kids. I think he'd actually got around to setting it up. So there's a little bit about that in the diary as well. And there's quite a bit at the end of the month of April. He's part of this War Child UK charity. And at the moment, the thing I suppose most people are aware of, or were aware of, in 1995 in the UK was the war in the Balkans. So as part of working for this charity, he's actually taken a trip out to Mostar, which at that point is, been ravaged by the war, and he's in parts of Bosnia generally. And just to put this in a place in time, if you're familiar with the conflict out there, the Dayton Agreement didn't happen till November of 1995. That's when it was signed. So it was getting close to that, but they weren't there yet. And as a consequence, it was still pretty dangerous out there. And there was also, as he's going around, he's obviously horrified by the amount of just damage as a result of the war that had been ongoing. 3.5 year long Bosnian war, and that ran from 1992 to December 1995. In terms of other things that aren't connected with the diary directly, what's been going on in the world? So we've got the First Chechen War and the massacre. We've got the Omaha city bombing, which he actually does mention in the diary, because that occurred on April the 19th. And this happened. So the internet became a wholly privatised system. The US stopped funding NSFNet. So it's interesting as well, you've got this evolution of the internet going on in the background at that time. This is a list of video games. I couldn't really see anything from April that I played. I think I may have had a demo for this, but I'm not sure. Not sure about that. Again, not specifically mentioned in the diary. On TV is quite interesting because, where was it? This was the debut of Friends, 28th of April. Again, not specifically mentioned in the diary, not that I remember anyway. So that's the thing I probably remember the most. Also, this, first episode of Father Ted as well. So yeah, two things that I've watched a lot over the years actually. I can remember people used to talk a lot about the Friends sitcom at work. Not so much Father Ted actually, that I remember. That I came to probably get a bit more into later actually. Films, I remember Bad Boys. None of these I watched. I don't remember at this point. I didn't really start going to the cinema, so I went through this period in about late 90s, early 2000s, where I used to go to the cinema pretty much every Sunday morning really early. It was super cheap, and also there'd be quite a few premieres on at that time, but it hadn't got to that yet, so I don't remember watching any of these. Probably saw Rob Roy on TV when it later appeared. Like I said, I remember these, but didn't see them when they came out. There might be one or two this year that I may have gone to the cinema, and we'll see. Looks like there's some remakes here as well. Remake of Village of the Damned. I didn't even know that John Carpenter had remade that. Hadn't really been keeping up much with his work by then. And this, I remember the original for this. So made for TV. See, yeah, that's right, 1975 film. Yeah, so I remember the film way back. So albums, a lot of really interesting debut albums. Again, not mentioned in the diary, but happening in the background. We've got debut album by Strapping Young Lad. KMFDM, just mentioned in passing. It's not a debut album, but they're quite deep into their album, eighth album. Well worth listening to. Interesting industrial band of very much of the time. Debut Andy Warhol's album. This would have been the fourth album, final album by White Zombie. A Small Deadly Space. I couldn't find this on Spotify, unfortunately. That was the second album by Fight, which had Rob Halford as the lead vocalist. This UFO album was the one where Michael Schenker had returned, and Paul Raymond and Andy Parker. Cool. Debut album by Moonspell, Portuguese band, and debut album by Behemoth as well, amongst other albums there. So I've added a number of those to the album lists, and we'll talk about those in a moment. And then finally, British music in 95. So here we are, April. I can't really remember this that much. I mean, Chris Evans was the new host of The Breakfast Show. I don't know if I really listened to The Breakfast Show at that point. And Tony McCarroll leaves Oasis, following a bust-up, surprise, surprise, replaced by Alan White. Now the lists I've been updating, this is my year of, just my general year of Brian Eno list. So it's basically all of the projects that are either attributed to Brian Eno in terms of he was the main musician, but also anything that he produced and collaborated in. So I've got it right up to the end of the 90s. So this is 1999, and I'm just adding this. So this eventually will be his whole output, collaborations, whatever you want to call it, from his very first work right through to today. So again, not running in parallel with the diary, but just the whole thing. The list I have got that are running parallel with the diary is I've got an album list from 1995, and these run in release order. So I've added some of the albums we've just spoken about, and I brought it right up to the end of April 95. So you got UFO, Behemoth, Moonspell, a few other albums I didn't specifically point out in here as well. So they've been all added in. And then finally this list, which is an interesting one for me. So it's 95 UK singles. Again, I'm just updating it as I go along. So we're up to the end of April. And it's all the new entries to the top 20. And this is one of the most fascinating things I've done as part of this exercise is it doesn't represent what I would be listening to at the time, but it takes me back to the time because we had the radio on in the background. I worked on a helpline and there was a radio on in the background all the time, and it was tuned into some radio station that played all the major hits. And so what tended to happen was that the new releases, the new entries would often get prioritized over the stuff that was just in the top 20 or that was already in the charts. I mean, it would get played, the top 20 would get played, but you tended to notice these new entries a lot more. So I thought it'd be interesting to create this new entry list, and it's been something I've been running since pretty much the start of this series. And so I just keep adding to it. So I've added all the new entries to the top UK top 20 for April. And like I said, it's giving me a really interesting listening experience. Even though I don't like half of this stuff, it really does take me back. And of course, if I was to just create a list from stuff that was in the UK charts at that time that I liked, it would be completely different than this. But yeah, it's re-educating my musical knowledge in some ways and taking me back. I mean, there is stuff in here that we got stuff by The Prodigy and Left Field. I did see one recently. Oh, the Simple Minds Hypnotised, Dull Parts by Hole. I sort of bought that album around about the time it came out originally, so. And stuff going back to the front of the year. I was a bit worried there wouldn't be a Portishead track in here, but there is, Glory Box. There was a Portishead single re-entry as well in April, but I don't count re-entries, unfortunately. Anyway, there we have it. That's my monthly check-in for my ongoing reading of a year with Swollen Appendices, which was Brian Eno's diary for 1995. Thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in the next episode.